This is a dire warning about a truly existential threat. And history suggests that 90% of people will ignore this warning until they've personally experienced or witnessed the pain associated with this warning. There was a battle called the Battle of Yarmuk. Historians universally agree that the Battle of Yarmuk was the first battle between Christians and Muslims. The Battle of Yarmuk took place in 636 AD or CE, which would be 636 years removed from the birth of Christ. The Battle of Yarmuk took place in the Middle East, or what would be considered modern day Jordan, and this battle took place near and around the Yarmuk River. I have concluded the evidence is overwhelming that the Battle of Yarmuk has never ended. And the Battle of Yarmuk continues in the Western world. We have seen the Muslims have a tremendous amount of success in Western Europe. And if we were going to be honest, Islam has virtually taken over Western Europe. And now, Islam, the Muslims, have set their sights on the United States of America. And recently, Islam has had unprecedented success against the West. They have had unprecedented success here in the United States of America. We've witnessed our largest city, our financial capital, elect a Muslim mayor. We've witnessed the election of a Muslim mayor in our largest city and our financial capital. Zoran Mandani would be considered one of the primary generals in this Battle of Yarmuk that continues today in the West and in the United States. We are the prize. We are the final prize in this battle between Christianity and Islam. Islam believes that it won't be long before they have duplicated the type of success that they've had in Western Europe here in the United States. Islam believes that this task of usurping America will be rather easy and seen with little to no resistance. And they have every reason to believe that. We only need to look at the recent election of Zohran Mamdani in New York City, in particular when you consider that just 2 decades ago, New York City and America was attacked by Islam. Not radical Islam, not political Islam. And the fact that many pundits, in particular conservative pundits and politicians, radio and television show hosts on the right, continue to distinguish radical Islam and political Islam from Islam. That is a fundamental existential mistake. And Islam realizes, Muslims realize, they realize that as long as Americans are afraid to tell the truth about Islam, they will have the upper hand in their caliphate against the Western world and the United States of America. If we cannot be honest about the enemy, we don't stand a chance at stopping the enemy. As long as we distinguish so-called political and so-called radical Islam from Islam, we allow the door to remain open. And we will continue to see unprecedented political and social gains on the behalf of Islam in the United States of America. I'm sickened when I listen to conservative pundits day after day, bending over backwards to declare that political Islam and radical Islam are not a part of Islam. And they do this out of wokeness, out of political correctness, and because they are fearful of damaging their brand and their income. So this, in effect, means that they are cowards. This, in effect, means that they are capitulators. This, in effect, means that they are disingenuous. Someone has to do something about this. I am and I have been determined to do something about this. You see, before we began to identify so-called political and radical Islam, Islam existed. And the very things described in the Hadith and the very things described in the Quran are in perfect alignment with what they identify currently as political and radical Islam. At the very least, this so-called political and radical Islam is only doing what has been prescribed in the Quran. If you take just a cursory glance at the Quran, it is abundantly clear that the Quran is the source and the motivation for what we currently call political and radical Islam. Zohran Mamdani was handed the reins to our largest city and our financial capital. And that is unfortunate. That is unfortunate. I have some numbers here that I'm going to share with you. And this is consequential. In the New York City mayoral election, Mamdani won 78% of the voters between the ages of 18 and 29. When it came to women from the age of 18 to 29, he won 84%. And that fact lends itself to what I have always stated. It is the women, the daughters of Eve, that continue to entertain the serpent and allow him into the house. Men, you had better step up. Black men, you had better step up. In the New York City mayoral election, when it came to the black vote, Mamdani was able to get 61% of the black vote. That's well over half. That demonstrates that while we are not as bad as these millennials and these Gen Zers, we played a major role in handing over New York City to Islam. Hispanics, you did slightly better than blacks. Mamdani was only able to get 57% of the Hispanic vote. But nonetheless, that is greater than 50%. And you contributed likewise to handing over New York City to Islam. When it came to individuals that had no religious affiliation, that may be atheist or agnostic, Mamdani was able to get 76% of that vote, which lends itself to what I have always said, that we should only allow in people with a Judeo-Christian background. When it came to non-Judeo-Christian religious people, meaning people of other religions outside of the Judeo-Christian belief system, Mamdani got 71% of the vote. And additionally, that lends itself to what I have always said. If we are going to protect our country, our borders, our language, our culture, our Judeo-Christian foundation and heritage, we should not allow people into this country that don't identify as Judeo-Christian. That does not mean that we would have a theocracy at that point by any stretch of the imagination. So very briefly, let me state this. And I've mentioned this in previous podcasts. Wherever you travel in the world, those countries will readily identify themselves with some religion or as pagan. I see no harm, I see no fallacy in America and Americans identifying themselves as a Judeo-Christian country, in particular when you consider that there's no disputing or refuting that our country has a Judeo-Christian heritage. You can look at the writings of the founding fathers, and it's evident that we are a Judeo-Christian country. But let me submit arguably an even greater form of evidence that establishes us as a Judeo-Christian country. The world views the United States as a Judeo-Christian country. And the United States is responsible for leading more souls to Christ than any other nation on the face of the earth. We are unmatched when you consider the amount of missionaries that we have sent and continue to send around the globe. We are unmatched when you consider the number of preachers and pastors that have been produced in the United States and the work that they have done that has extended beyond our borders. We are unmatched in our number of churches and synagogues. We are unmatched when it comes to the dissemination of the gospel in the form of Bibles and Bible production and distribution. We are unmatched when it comes to radio and television programs that have been disseminated and continue to be disseminated daily across the globe. You see, we have spread the gospel like no other country throughout the history of time. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the evidence that establishes us as a Judeo-Christian country and as the primary Judeo-Christian institution on the planet. The Battle of Yarmuk continues. It has never ended. And the Battle of Yarmuk is in full acceleration mode here in the United States of America, and we must do something about it. If we want to preserve America, if we want to preserve this Judeo-Christian capitalist constitutional republic, that is the moniker that I have assigned to the United States of America. You've heard me mention that if you're familiar with me. We are a Judeo-Christian capitalist constitutional republic, and there's no disputing that. Ladies and gentlemen, Islam and Muslims have no desire to coexist anywhere on the planet with anybody. Their history clearly establishes that, and their current actions clearly establishes that. Let me very quickly mention this. American women, you are not far removed from the fate of European women as it relates to the rape gangs that are active throughout Europe. These Muslim rape gangs that are active throughout Europe are able to function with impunity because Europe is liberal and woke. And the Europeans would rather not offend Islam and Muslims and risk being referred to as homophobic. So they allow their women to continue to be vulnerable and exposed with impunity to these rape gangs, these Muslim rape gangs. It is not a secret, and if you are unaware, and if you are unaware of this, you should immediately begin to do your research. Muslims are slaughtering black Negroids across Nigeria. And the Nigerian government is allowing this. These Muslims are slaughtering the Christians of Nigeria. Islam has concluded that the infidel, which would be anyone that is not a Muslim, has concluded that we have three choices. The first choice, and I'm going to come back to that choice for a particular reason. The first choice is that we pay a jizya tax, which is a tax that is assessed to the infidel when the infidel refuses to convert to Islam. And if they decide not to put that infidel to death, which is the second choice, in no particular order. And the third choice, you can convert, you can either convert, you can either be put to death, or you can be assessed the jizya tax. And that means that the so-called infidel must pay the Muslims in perpetuity, or convert, or be put to death. Those are your three options. I recently heard Muslims referring to the welfare and the aid that they receive in the United States as their jizya tax on us. They are convinced that they are entitled to welfare and all other forms of aid because that is their jizya tax. Their jizya tax that they are assessing on the infidel, to the infidel in America for not converting and for not being put to death at the hands of Islam. To some degree, they have converted people, obviously. They would like to have a greater conversion rate. I already mentioned that they are accessing our wealth, and they consider that to be their jizya tax. So that leaves being put to death as the remaining option. And they understand that at this point in time, they don't have the power or the means to put us to death. But they are certainly working overtime to create an atmosphere where the death sentence for not converting to Islam becomes a viable option. And at that point, America will exist no more. At that point, the Battle of Yarmuk will have concluded. Gentlemen and ladies, you can no longer ignore these consequential information podcasts. But unfortunately, approximately 90+% of you will ignore this and will take no action. You will take no action within your heart, within your mind, and you certainly will not take any visible action, i.e., speaking out publicly, etc. Many of you will immediately put me into a box, and that box will be titled Islamophobe. And you can conveniently put me in that box due to your ignorance, because you are ignorant about what is actually happening. Very quickly, before I end this particular segment, I want to circle back and scold every pundit on the right. And the reason why I hold the right accountable is because I am on the right, because I am a Republican, because I am a conservative, because I am a born-again Christian, because I am Judeo-Christian, because I am pro-American, etc. And I would expect more from those that I consider to be on my side. But when you refer to yourself as a Republican, as a conservative, as MAGA, and you stand up before the microphones and the cameras, and you repeat over and over again, day after day, segment after segment, episode after episode, that so-called political Islam and so-called radical Islam is something separate from Islam, and in doing that, you advocate for Islam, and in doing that, you leave the door open for Islam to come in and usurp this country that you claim to care so deeply for. And many of you refer to yourself as patriots and refer to one another as patriots. You are not that. You are no patriot. You are not MAGA. And how dare you claim to love this country? Because I know that you know that there's no distinguishing between so-called political Islam, so-called radical Islam, and Islam. And I know that you know, or you should at least know, that everything that is laid out by the Hadith and by the Quran is absolutely what we have seen manifesting in so-called political and radical Islam. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. This has been the Exodus Media Network. This has been Exodus TV. This has been Alan the Real Conservative. Please share this consequential information, and please take action as a result of being the recipient of this consequential information. Let me mention that I am reviving my Exodus Media Network channel on YouTube. Please watch Exodus TV on YouTube. There's also content available on TikTok, Instagram, X, and Facebook. I will begin to share all of the sources available to you for consequential information via the Exodus Media Network, where we are obligated to tell the truth, where I'm obligated to be honest, where I'm obligated to make sure that these things are disseminated to you and that these things are disseminated rapidly and widely. And let me also mention that I am currently working on a cross-country trip. This trip will be televised via social media, so you will have the opportunity to observe the trip and my interactions. And the purpose of this trip primarily is to help to disseminate this message, grow the audience, grow the network, etc., and bring awareness to the things that are existential threats to the United States of America and to Judeo-Christian peoples and to Judeo-Christian values and principles. Once the trip begins, as I said, you will be able to follow along. The trip will go from Ohio to the West Coast and back. I will zigzag across the country, and I believe that as a result of this, I will be able to increase awareness and help bring Americans together under the Judeo-Christian banner, and that we can save America once and for all.